All right, hey guys, welcome back. Thanks so much for checking out this last lecture in our series this semester. We still have about 8 minutes till 4, so for now, just hang in there and make yourself comfortable. In about 8 minutes, we will get this last lecture underway. Hi there, Angela. How's it going? Hello. Welcome back, everybody. It's been a good day so far. Just a lot of emails and grading and stuff, and just other office tasks, pretty much. But been able to get it all done. So as long as I'm productive, I guess that's good. Hey, Peachy. Oh, say hello to Peach. She's coming to say hi. Good afternoon. Hi, guys. Hello there, Fernanda. Hi, Rose. Peach is just too cute. Sometimes can't even believe the stuff she does. She's a silly kitty. Definitely a very affectionate, sweet cat. Feel like we just keep getting closer. She's very attached, and I feel the same. Her brother's running around here somewhere, but I guess he's sleeping for the moment. Just gonna turn on one light here. Professor Peach, we got a substitute guest lecture today. Take it away, Peachy. What's up? Hi, Nate. How's it going? Hey there, Tyler. Good to see you. You can see I got my hands full here. Little peach. Hi, Jasmine. Hey, Amaya. Just a couple minutes and then I'll get our meeting going today. Okay, we're almost ready to go. Okay, guys. Peachy, I'm gonna have to push it down. I'll let her stay up there for a little while. Hi, Sebastian. How's it going? All right, everyone. Well, it's 4 o'clock, so let's just resume. Thank you guys so much for your attendance today and for all your hard work all semester long. We've really come close now to the very end, so this is the last day that we're going to have any new information from our book that we discuss. I'm going to just give you a couple more notes on Chapter 9, and then from here, we just are going to have 2 review sessions next week and then the final. So I hope you guys have had a good time and at least have learned some interesting material and some concepts that will help you in life. But we're much closer to the end than the beginning now, obviously. So I'm just going to go ahead and resume with the notes on Chapter 9 and pick up where I left off last time, however long that takes. Then we'll be done for today. And then the thing I'll do over the weekend is I'll mail you guys the study guide. You'll get that sent to the whole class as an announcement. And then you'll be able to use that study guide to prepare your study notes for the final and also to be well prepared to participate in the review sessions. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Don't forget that your last homework number 4 is due on Tuesday. So make sure to send it in to me before the end of the day on Tuesday. And let's just get back into it, okay, guys? So we're looking still at Chapter 9, the last chapter in the book, which is all about ethics. And I'm going to just briefly summarize the topics and information that we covered on our last. So ethics, as we all know now, is the study of morality and moral concepts. So generally speaking, right and wrong, good and bad, moral and immoral. These kind of ideas have to do with ethics. And moral behavior actions can be divided into 3 categories: morally impermissible actions, morally permissible actions, or morally obligatory actions. And we had some discussion about those a couple meetings back. Impermissible acts are wrong. permissible acts are not wrong, and obligatory acts are things that you must do, and that would be wrong not to do. We talked about moral reasoning, the idea of moral values, non-moral values, the relationship of having moral values to your own personal happiness. We talked about conscience, the moral sentiments, and within the realm of the moral sentiments, we talked about, for example, empathy, compassion, helper's high, and then moral outrage, resentment, guilt. Finally, we got to the whole conversation of the development of moral reasoning and the work of the psychologist and researcher Lawrence Kohlberg. He thought that moral reasoning developed in 3 general stages in life. So it goes from the pre-conventional to the conventional to the post-conventional stage of moral development. And we had some discussion of those stages. Pre-conventional means that you just think about morality in terms of avoiding punishment for yourself. So it's a little more of an egocentric way of thinking of right and wrong, and that's the most basic and primordial way of thinking about ethics. Beyond that, there's the conventional, which is that you actually want to fit into like norms and standards of the society around you or your peer group in order to be approved of and thought of as like a nice boy or a nice girl. And then the post-conventional level is when you start to apply your own moral judgments based on the principles that you think are true. And sometimes you'll even reach conclusions that run contrary to the prevailing view of the society or the majority or whatever. After that, we started our discussion of moral theories. And that's where we basically broke off at the last lecture. So I'm going to pick up from there and just tell you a little bit about these different moral theories. But let me just see here with the group that we've got. Can anybody tell me what are 2 main kinds of moral theory? There's one type and then another type. What am I referring to? If you can dredge that back up from your memory or your notes, just to give me a little input. 2 different types of moral theory. So what could those be? This is from the like tail end of our Tuesday meeting. Let's see if one of us can say this. Okay, good. Moral relativism and universalism, exactly. So moral relativism is when you think that morality is not universal, it's not absolute, it's just relative. So it can depend, it can vary. Whether something's right or wrong is not an absolute fact. It's like depending on who or where we are asking this question. Hi, Caesar, good to see you too. So that's moral relativism. Moral universalism is the exact opposite, and it says that there is a universal moral code that is the same for everyone, everywhere, all the time. And so morality, according to universalism, is absolute and universal. Now, inside of moral relativism, there were 2 types, ethical subjectivism and cultural relativism. So just another quick review of those concepts. Ethical subjectivism says that what's right and wrong is totally subjective, and it just depends on a person's personal opinion. So I guess the strength of that idea is that nobody has like a very heavy-handed moral perspective, which says we all have to see morality the same way. So it gives us the ability to have, diverse moral positions. But what could be a problem with the whole ethical subjectivism concept? Does anybody remember that point? Problematic thing or a criticism that a person might be able to make about the whole standpoint of ethical subjectivism? What do you know about that? What's the issue, if any, with a person who says morality is just whatever I think it is? It's my opinion, it's your opinion, it's just the individual's opinion. Okay, good, Eduardo, because it could be used to justify actions that we intuitively think are actually really immoral. So like, what if there's a person who believes in the moral justifiability of killing people or rape or pedophilia or all kinds of horrible things? Nobody wants to say, or I would hope very few people want to say, that those things are acceptable and okay to do morally. But of course, there are deviant individuals in the world that believe everything under the sun. At least a couple people are that way, as we know. So it would be better, many people think, not to grant any legitimacy to the viewpoint of such an individual and say, well, there's really no fact of the matter, whether it's right or wrong. I guess according to that person, it's not wrong. So that's the issue there. If we think there are things that are really, really wrong, and that they cannot be ever judged, even on an individual level, to be okay, or that they shouldn't be, then we have to reach for something broader than just ethical subjectivism. Another kind of moral relativism is a cultural relativism. What it says is that morality is not down to one individual's opinion, but rather it depends on the society that a person is a member of. So the social norms and expectations and standards of the society you're in, that determines morality. So that's a little better, I think, than ethical subjectivism, because say you've got like some kind of psycho that believes in killing people and they think it's good, but they live in a society like ours where we condemn that kind of behavior, then we would say, well, they're still doing something wrong because society believes it's wrong, even though the one person doesn't. But there's still some limits and problems with even cultural relativism, because say, for example, there's a cultural practice in another society that you think, you just deem it to be fundamentally immoral and wrong. According to cultural relativism, you can't really say that. All you could say is, well, I think it's wrong according to my cultural standard, but they have a different set of norms and standards, so over there it's not wrong. But do you really want to say that, I don't know, certain practices, whether it's like human sacrifice, child marriage, you know, there are like societies, of course, in the world that are, killing people for witchcraft. Think about the fact that in some countries, you know, people can be executed for declaring a sexual preference that's not heterosexual, you know. So if you feel that that's just fundamentally wrong, even when it's practiced some places, then you have to go more towards the moral universalist line of thinking, which does say that there are certain things that are absolutely wrong and that there's a universal moral code. So we're going to spend some time now going over some moral universalist theories. That's where I'm going to kind of take us next. And I'll say one more thing that's also a problem with cultural relativism, the second issue. Cultural relativism has a hard time explaining why we would ever make changes in society, or it has a very hard time explaining the whole idea of social progress. Because take a society which says at one time slavery is okay and it's legal, and another time they say, never mind, we changed our mind and now it's illegal and it's wrong. Well, why did we change the law if the society thought that it was okay in the beginning and that meant that it was okay because that was the social norm? Then what would have been a reason to change it if society dictates that it's good? A better explanation would be, well, it was always wrong, and we kind of, you know, became a little bit more morally enlightened and we recognized this fact. It was wrong even before it was abolished. Otherwise, what would have been the point of moving towards abolition? So those are also issues, I would say, that are problems for the whole cultural relativist viewpoint. Okay, so now, yeah, let's look at some universalist moral theories. That's the whole other side of the coin. There's a couple of different ones. Okay, so there are moral universalist theories that have one set of principles, and then there are other ones with different principles. I'm going to try my best to at least tell you some information about the main two. So there's like a big two, and they're kind of competitors and rivals in the space of moral theory. But these are the big main dominant perspectives that people usually choose between. So I'm going to start with the first one of these, and that is a theory of ethics that's called utilitarianism. Okay, so I'll move Peachy here. She's really being sweet today, and she wants to be involved, but I'm going to have to... Come on, Peachy, how about you just sit down here? Will that work for you? Okay. You see this word. Sorry for the glare. I can fix that. Try to do so. Okay, it says utilitarianism. Sorry, to the next room. Got to put her away. My bad, Peachy. I'll get you out of there in a minute. Okay, guys. Really sorry. She's a lot of fun, and I actually think it's cool to have her around, but not to block the board. So, anyway, back to this. Utilitarian. Let me tell you a little bit about the major historical figure and philosopher who was one of the big advocates for utilitarianism. So this is a British man, and he lived in the 19th century. His name is John Stuart Mill. So John Stuart Mill, he lived from 1806 until 1873. And he is credited often with being like one of the forefather figures of this philosophy of ethics called utilitarian theory or utilitarianism. There are a few other important figures that are also kind of associated with spearheading the theory. One of them that is actually a slight historical predecessor to John Stuart Mill, and he's briefly mentioned in the book, is Jeremy Bentham. That's another British philosopher from similar time period, but he's a few decades older, born before Mill. Although perhaps Bentham is maybe a little prior in time, I think that Mill gives the clearer and more precise discussion of utilitarianism. So I often just use his name and identity when I mention this to students and teach you about it. And John Stuart Mill actually had a pretty interesting life. So he was a British philosopher and a political economist, and he also served for a little while in the British Parliament, which is, you know, like the equivalent over there of our Congress here in the United States. So that means he was basically a member of the government for a while as a legislator in the Parliament. And so he worked in philosophy, economics, and in public policy. And he had an interesting mix of different views. Judged by modern standards, he would be what we call today a libertarian politically, which means basically that he believed in the concept of limited government, and he thought that individual liberty and freedom should be paramount in a society. So he thought that the state should have the least power, which is consistent with us maintaining social order, but no more than that. So he would have been one person who thought that if you were going to engage in like self-regarding behavior, but it didn't harm anybody else or affect anybody else's interests, that you should be left alone to do that. So he would be one person who thought, you know, prohibition of like alcohol is not necessary and right, because people should be able to choose that for themselves since it's their own body and it's their own life. Or if a person wanted to gamble or seek out prostitution or, you know, actions of this kind, it would be tolerated within a libertarian type society that Mill thought was the best, because we got to grant people the freedom to do what they wish as long as it doesn't interfere with anybody else's liberty. So like that was one thing he believed very strongly in, and he wrote essays and books on that. On Liberty is perhaps one of the most famous ones. But he also held what we could call, I guess, progressive views, judged by the standards of his time, because he believed that slavery should be worldwide abolished, that women should be granted women's suffrage, the right to vote. So he had all these different interesting views, but what he's most well known for is his work in philosophy, really, and his development of the utilitarian ethical framework. So let me now just try and tell you some of the basic details of utilitarianism. I could spend a lot more time on this than just what we're going to use for now, but I'm going to at least try to help you know the basics. So utilitarian theory, it basically has this principle that you're supposed to apply to all your actions, all your behavior. What it says is act always to promote the greatest amount of overall happiness for the greatest number of people. Okay, so if I was going to give a summary, a concise summary of the whole view, this is pretty much the idea. Always, whenever you're doing things, try to do the thing that's going to create the greatest amount of overall, even I should actually include that word to be very precise, so maybe add it in your notes if you have room. Act always to promote the greatest amount of overall happiness for the greatest number of people. So the theory says to you that happiness is the thing that we all want in life. And so more of it rather than less is always better in terms of when you do things. If your action could produce happiness for yourself and for other people too, then the more of it that it creates, that makes the action morally better. So if you had, for example, choices that you were facing and you were trying to make a decision in that situation, like what's the right choice? And suppose you have options, right? Like A, B, C, and D. Just you have four possible options you can take. If you're a utilitarian, which would be like the noun form of a person who believes in this theory, A utilitarian would say, okay, well, let's take stock of how much total happiness would be the result of these various four options, and whichever one would create the greatest amount for all affected by it, that's the one that is my moral obligation to do. So to live as a utilitarian, you would constantly have to be directing your attention to how much total happiness would be the consequence of the actions that are available to you. And then it would advise you, the theory would say that the moral obligation you have is to simply select the action among your options that will generate or lead to the most great amount of happiness in comparison with the other options, okay? So it's all about getting to the best results in terms of overall human happiness. But there's a little more detail that I want to give you to expand on that. So take that in, think about it. It's all about the maximization of total happiness for as many people or as much as possible. What about happiness? Okay, so the word happiness that is being used here has a kind of specific meaning to utilitarian thought. So they will define happiness as basically pleasure and the absence of pain. Maybe I can use a better marker here. Okay. Now, I'm going to erase the definition of utilitarianism because I want to create some space here to talk to you about a principle that's supposed to support the theory, and that's what Mill calls the greatest happiness principle. So let me clear that space, and I'm going to talk about the greatest happiness principle. Once I do that, I'm going to come back to this point, and that'll make more sense in context. So here is the greatest happiness principle. So if you ask a person like Mill or any utilitarian thinker, why should I buy into this theory? Why do you think this is the correct moral view? This would be given as justification or for defense of the theory. This is supposed to be like a pillar of support that props the theory up. So the greatest happiness principle says this. It says actions are right to the extent that they promote happiness, and actions are wrong to the extent that they promote the reverse of happiness. Okay, so okay, so what it says, and I'll read it so that everyone's clear. It says actions are right, morally right, to the extent that they promote happiness, and actions are wrong, morally wrong, to the extent that they promote the reverse of happiness. Okay, now happiness in this whole equation is defined as you see it here, pleasure in the absence of pain. So let me see if you can just quickly deduce what is the reverse of happiness if happiness is defined as pleasure and the absence of pain. Okay, so let me give you a hint. Reverse of happiness is going to be blank and blank. And it's going to be kind of like this, but just the flip side. So what is the reverse of pleasure and the absence of pain? Let me see who can think of this. Happiness, pleasure, and the absence of pain. Reverse of happiness, what and what? So if, sorry for the glare, if happiness is pleasure and the absence of pain, then the reverse of happiness would be what and what? Pain and the absence of pleasure. Perfect. Yes, that's right, Jasmine. So pain and the absence of pleasure. Okay, so now that we have the clear definition of happiness and the reverse, we can be even more comprehensive in our way of understanding this greatest happiness principle. So in other words, what the greatest happiness principle is saying is that, so to the degree or to the extent that when you do something, you're creating pleasure for people or taking their pain away, people will think, or you'll just be regarded as having done something good. So what people regard as good is the promotion of pleasure or the elimination of pain. On the other hand, what's wrong to do is to actually create pain for people or to take the happiness or pleasure they've already got away from them. So, and the words "to the extent that" are just supposed to indicate that it's a matter of degree. So your actions, it's not like a light switch. They're either just like on or off. They're either good or bad and black and white. It's rather like they're on a scale. So an action can be better and better if it produces more happiness rather than less. And it could, or if it takes more pain away rather than less. An action can be worse and worse morally if it's creating more and more pain rather than less. Or if it's eliminating more pleasure rather than less. Okay, and this is just one random example, and it's not limited to such an extreme case. But suppose that you were like in the midst of a dangerous fire. I mean, actually, right now it's kind of ironic because some of you guys maybe are. I know there's something happening over in the Orange County area. I was able to smell some of the smoke even from Long Beach. But anyway, back to the hypothetical, even though it's not exactly totally hypothetical. Yeah, but yeah, so say that there's a fire that's raging, and you are in a position to be one person that prevents people from dying in a fire of their house. Okay, so like say that you're on the scene somewhere and you can see there's a house that's burning and there's inhabitants within the house. So say you went in there and you did something really heroic and you rescued people from burning to death, so you saved their lives. Now, if you did that and you saved one person's life, that's an amazing, very good thing. Because by preventing them from burning to death, not only do you prevent all the pain that would have been associated with the actual event of them burning, but also take, for example, all the pleasure they otherwise would have lost in the future. Like they wouldn't have continued to live. So if they had not been saved by you, then we would have deleted from this world all the pleasure that would have been getting older, retiring, opening a business, having a family, seeing future technology and travel, whatever things they still want to do. So by preventing all that, by saving the life, you do something great. Now, if you save 2 lives, 3 lives, 4, that's just stacking up to even better moral record. That's even more virtuous and good, okay? On the other hand, let's take the reverse. Say someone is the arsonist who has set the fire. Okay, well, if they did that, they're already causing a lot of damage and destruction, even if it's just to property or land. But if it ends up burning people, then that's even more felt as pain, both because of the elimination of all their future happiness and whatever other suffering they go through if they get burned. So if they did that and it ended up costing one person their life, we would think they did a horrible bad thing. But if they did that and it hurt 2, 3, 4, 10, 100, that's just getting worse and worse. If you think about a person like Hitler or somebody who engineers like a whole attempt at genocide and kills millions of people, I mean, that's very, very high on the moral scale of how bad a thing could be because of how much pain it creates and how much pleasure it takes away. So, we can also take this down a stage. There's also lesser things, like you betray somebody that trusted you and that causes them emotional pain. And that can be a matter of degree also. So this is something that's supposed to extend across the whole range of possible human actions. But I'm just giving you some examples to use to think about what it means to do something that creates either pleasure or pain, or that takes away either pleasure or pain. Okay, so then, utilitarian thought and ethics does say you're supposed to try your best to do the action that'll create the best overall yield of happiness for all affected, minus pain. And the greatest happiness principle is offered as a reason in favor of this perspective. As further defense of this idea, Mill also says that why should we be concerned with the maximization of overall happiness? Because it seems that happiness / pleasure, since he uses them kind of as synonyms, is the only thing that we all pursue as an end and not as a means. So that's a very also powerful and important statement in Mill's writing, that pleasure, happiness is the only thing, it's the one and only thing that we pursue as an end and not as a means. So let me explain what that statement means very quickly. An end is just a sort of fancy word for a goal or an objective. For example, you maybe have heard people say the phrase, the ends justify the means. Sometimes people say that when they do something that would normally be criticized, but they were doing it because of some very important goal that they had. So like the statement, the ends justify the means, is intended to express that if you have a goal which is of important enough value, then that can kind of excuse whatever perhaps unsavory things that you might have had to do to get to that goal. The means that you take to an end are the things that you do to achieve a goal that you have. Okay, so what Mill says there, that happiness, pleasure is the only thing we pursue as an end, is that basically everything we do in our lives, every single thing that we ever do, is done in the pursuit of happiness. And so that means happiness is your real goal. Everything else that you ever do is not desired on its own sake. It's desired as a means to the attainment of happiness and pleasure. Okay, so if happiness and pleasure is the one thing that every single person is seeking out, that we all seem to want, that means we all recognize it as a good thing already, and that's shown in our behavior. So if each one of us is pursuing happiness for the one person that we are, Mill just says, let's try and elevate the goal of pursuit of happiness to all affected by our actions rather than just the individual. And I'd like to try my best to make his claim a little bit relatable to you, the idea that happiness and pleasure is the goal, and that nothing else is really the goal, and that everything else is a stepping stone or an instrument to get to that goal. So let me try to work with you through your own current situation, okay? Because one thing that I know you're doing right now is that you're watching this lecture for critical thinking. So what's the reason though? You have a reason for doing this. It's not like you're just doing it unconsciously or randomly. You have some type of goal in mind that, for example, watching this lecture helps you to get to that goal. So what is the point? Why are you even doing this? What's the reason though? That's my question for any of you. What is the objective behind you, taking this lecture right now and taking this class and all that? What's the reason for what you're doing right now? I know it can't be for no reason. So what is it? Okay, so you're saying education and a degree. Let's take it very step-by-step slowly. Okay, Alec, that's a good place to start. So this class is just one small part of your overall education to get you to your graduation, right? So you think, if I take this class, it will help me to satisfy certain requirements or give me certain units that are going to take me closer to some goal of graduation ultimately, right? So this class and the others that you take are a means to the end of getting graduation. But hold on, why do you want to graduate though? It's not like you're going to be up there with a degree and you're like, what? I don't even know what to do anymore. This was the only thing I ever had a goal to do. I have no goals. You want to graduate, but that is also just a means to something else. So what's the reason for you wanting to graduate? Why do you want that? You say you want it. I can tell you want it because you're in this class, but why do you want it? What's the reason for you wanting graduation? It's a means to something else, but what will that help you get? Okay, so Nee, you're saying to take the content of this class and hopefully apply it to the real world later on. Well, that's very noble and virtuous, Nee, and I do appreciate the thought, because what you're saying is that this is like desired for its own sake. But to be real with you and without it disparaging the value of this concept in this class, I mean, you really want to graduate because it's going to help you do other things. So for example, Jasmine, I like what you're saying, and also you, Alec, graduation, as you guys all know, helps you be a more competitive job seeker, and it qualifies you for more positions that you would not be qualified for without the degree. So probably you do want to graduate for certain reasons, like just the value of the education, but you also want to have that so that you attain a degree which gives you job seeking opportunities, right? Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. You take the class as a means to the goal of graduating. You want to graduate as a means to the end of getting a job. But we're not done yet. Why do you want a job? Do you just like the idea of work? That's what you've been thinking this whole time? I can't wait to have labor. I can't wait to be a person who works. Yes, you want to get a job and work, but why though? Okay, so Eduardo, you're saying to be employed and make income. Okay, good. So we're getting a little closer to the end here. Start back at the beginning. Take a class. Why? To graduate. Why? To get a degree. Why do you want the degree? To get a job. Why do you want a job? Okay, to earn income and wealth. And we're almost at the end of this justification chain. So why is it that you want the wealth and income that comes from having a job? You want to have that wealth and income because it'll allow you to purchase goods and services and also to have financial security, correct? That money that you'll make from the job, if you can get it, is going to be your money that you use to buy things that you want and to also have whatever financial security and purchasing power that comes from that wealth. So why do you want to have the purchasing power for goods and services and to have financial security? And at this point, there's really only one reason that you can say you want that. But do you know? I mean, I think you do. Why do you want to be able to have purchasing power? Why do you want to have financial security? Why do you want money? What's the reason? I think if you just think about it, now we've gotten to the end, and it has to do with Mill. So why do you want money? To live comfortably and to be happy, exactly. You want it all in the end because you're pursuing your happiness. You're pursuing your personal happiness, and that's the reason that you have any motivation to go through all these steps and jump through all these hoops. I guarantee you that if you could really be convinced that what you're doing right now is not going to lead to your happiness, like what if someone could convince you that getting education will just saddle you with debt, it will not give you increased job prospects, and it'll just make you mentally ill and depressed, so you'll be miserable if you do this. Then you probably would drop out today because you'd say, well, I'm trying to get happy. I'm trying to get something good for myself. So you definitely believe, and you should believe, that education is a portal to all kinds of further goals, financial goals, and personal goals that you have. But if we reach the end and I say, why do you want to be happy? That's when it's okay to just shrug your shoulders and be like, I don't know, just because that's what it is to even be alive and be a living human being. And so what it's showing us, if we think this is a correct kind of description of the landscape of your goals and so on, is that everything you're doing in the end is because you're seeking out happiness. So if happiness is what you want, what I want, and what each person wants, then Mill just says, let's use that as our sort of North Star to guide us through life morally. Just try to create the most overall happiness for people because it's recognized universally as a good. Now, I want to also take a moment to show you how the theory could be applied to like a real concrete situation in life. Making you rethink your pursuit of happiness? Well, I hope not. I mean, I don't think I've tried to change your mind about anything. It's good to be happy. I think you've already been pursuing your happiness. This is just a way of thinking a little bit more explicitly about what's really driving your behavior and making you want to do these things. I guess someone could argue, I'm doing it because other people expect me to. I don't even know if I'll be happy. But I think that if you really reflect on the question, you'll see that your own happiness has to be the goal. Otherwise, what's the point? But anyway, I want to walk you guys through a quick example of how this theory could actually be utilized in a basic real-world situation. So here's a box that we're going to draw. I'll do a better marker if I can find one. Towards the end of the semester, I need to buy a new pack of these. Okay, anyway, but here's a box. And we're going to create 4 vertical columns within the box. So that's this. Then we're going to have 4 horizontal rows that cross that, so that's this. And this, therefore, generates a grid with 16 boxes inside. Okay, now, we're going to do a little exercise. I'm just asking you guys right now to throw out different types of pizza, okay? And I'm needing 4 of them, 1 for each vertical column. So I did get the red stain off. The marker seemed to perform a little better after that. I don't know if it was just because it was in the bag in the container for too long. But anyway, what's one type of pizza that's well known to all people and easy to identify? If you've never tried the pizza, it's a great food. But seriously, what kind of pizza is there? There's many different types. What's one of them? Okay, pepperoni. It's a good place to start. I wasn't thinking of brands, actually, Alec, more toppings and stuff. So here's P for pepperoni. Okay, so I also see a mention there of cheese. C for cheese. Where we have sausage, there's another one mentioned. What's wrong, Alec? Oh, no, that's fine. I get what you're doing. Okay, so, and then veggie. I see veggie, I see supreme, I see pineapple. I'm kind of interested to see how you guys feel about pineapple, so I'm going to put that in there. Sorry to reuse the letter P, because P stands for pepperoni here, but P, lowercase I, Stands for pineapple there at the end. Okay, so here's next. I just need 4 members of the group here to simply let me put their name up there, and I'm going to have really easy questions for those 4 people about how their preferences are when it comes to these different toppings. So just say me if you're willing to be one of these 4 people. It's not a big deal. You're not on camera or on the mic, so it'll be easy and no pressure. But just let me know who's willing to do that. I'll just go with the first 4 pretty much. Okay, good. Eduardo, you're 1. And I see Jasmine there. That's good. Next up, Angela and Alec. Okay, that's great. Okay, so here's the deal. There's 4 types of pizza toppings here, and we're going to suppose that only one of them can be ordered, all right? Now, wait, sorry. Where are the 2 Jasmines? I guess, oh, yeah, there's Jasmine Negrete and Jasmine Rivera. At first, I was looking at the emoticon emoji, so I guess I was thinking you, Jasmine Rivera. So let's go with that. Sorry for the ambiguity. See, amphibole. I told Jasmine that she should give an answer. When there's 2 Jasmines, the pronoun she, who does it refer to? Anyway, good. So to the question here, your 4 students that are on the board, maybe just so that there's no ambiguity. Okay, sorry, Jasmine, but no worries. Okay, so yeah, I want you guys to think about how you would rate the various options here, okay? And I basically want you to give me a number. This number I'm going to ask you for is going to be between 0 and 50, just so that we all have like a set range. And what do you think this number will stand for if I ask you like to give me your number for pepperoni, and you say, I don't know, 20 or 30 or 40? What is this number going to stand for as we're now evaluating utilitarian ethics? What's your thought about that? The number that you'll be asked to produce will refer to or will designate what fact? Just want to make that clear before we go forward. How much happiness it will bring you. Yeah, sort of how good it tastes, Eduardo, but I think the way Jasmine has put it, Jasmine Rivera has put it, is a little bit more clear. It's just the quantity of pleasure, if you could somehow think of it as a numeric quantity of how much pleasure you would receive or feel in case that was the choice that had been made. So it's like a pleasure score between 0 and 50. And so to those that are on the board, I want you to just now start thinking about your number for each of the 4 cases between 0 and 50. And the number you give should be consistent with your feelings about how these are pleasing or not pleasing to you. So if you're looking at a topping or a type that you find extremely good, it's your favorite, for example, maybe you're going to give it like a 40 or even a 50. If you feel like it's not so good, it's going to be lower on the scale. Suppose that you like, I don't know, sausage twice as much as pepperoni, then that should be shown in your number, like giving, I don't know, sausage 40, pepperoni 20. So only you know your preferences, okay? We're all different and unique people, so we got to kind of see how each different person's preferences play out, and then we'll come up with the utilitarian right decision, okay? So starting then with Eduardo, I'm just going to go from left to right, okay? So I'm asking you to start off with pepperoni. When it comes to pepperoni, what do you think? 0 through 50. How much pleasure is there for you? You can't be wrong. It's just your viewpoint. It's just your taste when it comes to this type of pizza. So Eduardo, let me know. 45. Okay, that's a solid, good score. You must like pepperoni quite a bit. No problem with that. What about cheese? Let me hear your cheese number. And you know where I'm going next, so just kind of, you can already be thinking about the next one. Okay, so cheese 40, a little less than pepperoni, but still pretty high. So sausage, where's that for you, Eduardo? What would that one be? Okay, I'm looking at the number. It's a little hard to read, though. You're saying 30? Oh, yeah, 30 equals sausage. Okay, good, 30. And then finally, we've got pineapple. So where are you at with that one? 35. Okay, so You seem to like pizza generally. You know, it's not like any of the toppings you find to be totally against your taste. Good, thanks, Eduardo. So now I'm going on to the next. Jasmine, say to me, what do you think about these 4 toppings, starting with the pepperoni? That's all you, Jasmine. What do you say? Okay, 40. We're going with 40 for pepperoni. Okay, and then it's cheese. 25. Okay. Not quite as much enjoyment. Sausage. 35. All right. Okay. And then pineapple. What's the case with the pineapple? 0. Okay. Yeah. Figure we get some people with powerful, passionate feelings about pineapple because I know that it divides people. It could tear friendships, family members apart. But anyway, yeah, very good. Thanks, Jasmine. Next up, Angela, just help me know your view about these 4. We'll go ahead and start with pepperoni again. So what is that for you? What's that one? Okay, 50, right at the top. So pepperoni lover, I guess. Well, I can't beat that, I guess, given our range. But what is cheese? You could have a tie. But anyway, yeah, cheese. $35. Okay. A little less. What about now sausage? You know? 40. Okay. And second place so far, and then it's pineapple. 0. Okay, another 0. So you guys are telling me, Jasmine, Angela, you get no pleasure. I mean, it's just there's no happiness there. You're eating it, and you're like, I would almost rather not eat this at all. Okay, but that's fair. Okay, some people think it is weird to have the sweet toppings. I seem to know a lot of people who like it. I'm kind of neutral on it. But anyway, okay, to Alec. Let's go, Alec. What about pepperoni? Let's hear it. What do you think? Still with us? Is that true? Can you hear me, Alec? Okay, got you. Thanks so much. 30 for pepperoni. 50 for the cheese. 30 for. Sorry, 30 for pepperoni, 50 for cheese, 30 for sausage. Yeah. And then finally, you're telling me 10 for the pineapple. Okay. So the grid's all full. Filled it all in with these different values. So suppose that somebody's a utilitarian, right? What is the mathematical operation? No, that's fine. Thanks, Alec. It was perfect. So, but what's the mathematical operation that we should do now if we want to find out what's the right choice according to utilitarianism? Can anybody figure that one? We have to simply do what? To compute the morally good or obligatory action. Okay, Jasmine, add up the values for each topping and pick the largest value. Correct. So let's add vertically down. We're going to have 4 totals at the bottom of each column. What is this sum going to represent? Well, it will represent the sum total of happiness or pleasure that choice would result in. And then we can just go with the biggest number. Correct. So let's start here. Double check my math, but I'll try to be accurate. It's 85, 135, 165. Okay, 65, 70, 100, 150. Now, 65, 105, 135. And I'm sorry to say, but pineapple 45. So based on this distribution, what is the so-called morally obligatory or morally right action to do for this relative to this group of individuals? I think we can just see it, but just so you can tell me, it is to pick the topping of which one? Just so I know you see it. Okay, it's pepperoni. That's right. So I'm putting an asterisk next to it to just designate that that is the one that dominates the others in terms of maximizing total happiness for the group that's affected. So in this situation, the selection of pepperoni becomes a moral obligation for whoever it is within the group that is empowered to make the decision. Now, is it everybody's favorite, this choice? Well, no. I mean, for example, if we just look at Alec, for one, Alec is into pepperoni, but he likes cheese much better. So Alec is one person in the group that I guess here sort of has to take one for the team, as it were. He's not going to get his most preferred choice, but to choose anything else would result in a lesser aggregate amount of total happiness for all affected. So sometimes utilitarian theory will require a person to set aside their most preferred choice if something that is incompatible with it generates more utility for all the people that are affected. So it's not just the same thing as just doing whatever is the most pleasurable thing to you. There's another theory in ethics, which is called hedonism, and it says the right action is just whatever is most pleasurable, but just to you, the one individual. But most people don't take the hedonistic ethical viewpoint very seriously because it seems to a lot of people, and I think for good reasons, to just be an invitation to disregard other people, think only about yourself. And most people, I mean, some people actually do that, of course, but ethics is supposed to be how you ought to act if you're like morally enlightened, not just how we have a tendency to act from our own self-interest anyway. So there is hedonism, which also agrees that it's happiness that you're trying to maximize, but just for the one person. But anyway, that's utilitarian ethics applied to one kind of trivial choice situation. Now, look, I know I've given you a case where people are picking pizza toppings, and that's not exactly like war and peace, life and death. But if you're a utilitarian and if you had this moral perspective, then you would bring this way of thinking to all decisions, even those that have extremely important consequences. Say that you were a legislator and you were called on to make a vote on a bill. Now your choice is, do I vote yay or nay on the bill? If you were the utilitarian legislator, you would try to game out the two scenarios. You'd be like thinking, well, if this bill is passed in our society, how much total happiness will that result in for all the members of society, compared with if the bill is defeated? And whichever of the two outcomes you think would lead to the most overall happiness minus pain, that would be the right thing to vote for. So it could have to do with all types of decisions, large and small. I just give you a kind of an easy case because it's not too weighty or anything. Another area where some people criticize utilitarianism is that it sometimes is willing to tolerate actions that some people find morally completely forbidden. But as long as it generates the most overall happiness compared to alternatives, this theory says that you still should do it. So sometimes, like if you're a utilitarian, you should do things that strike against certain moral principles you might have. Like, is it wrong to lie? Well, according to utilitarianism, it just depends. If telling the truth will cause less pleasure than lying will, then you should lie. Like, imagine if somebody asks you, hey, how did you like this meal that I cooked? I worked so long on it, and you found it to be disgusting. That's the truth. But if you tell them the truth, that's going to hurt their feelings. And if you lie to them, oh, it was delicious, then that's going to make them happy. So you might think, here's a case where, in the interest of promoting more happiness, it's better to lie than to tell the truth. But after a while, you know, the theory starts to make you wonder, well, are there any limits? Like, well, what if I could cheat in a relationship and just not tell the other person? If they don't know about it, they'll feel better. And if they do know about it, they'll feel worse. So what? Now just there's no virtue to being honest, at least in many situations where the truth hurts, I guess. What about if there was a homeless person with a whole bunch of vital organs and they're like they have no loved ones or associates and they're actually like a drain on society? So what? Is it okay for a person to kill them to take the organs and save like 5 other human beings that are more impactful in society and they're suffering from organ failure? Most of you would probably say that's absolutely wrong. But utilitarian theory has a hard time explaining why, even though, of course, there are clever arguments to sort of show why it wouldn't be okay. But at least initially, some of these are problem cases. Even hugely destructive actions, like say when we dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, 2 of them in World War II after Pearl Harbor, there's a utilitarian moral justification for that, and that's actually the one that's usually given by historians and scholars that try to defend the moral justice of it. That is the idea that, okay, the bomb kills like 100,000 people all at once, but if you don't drop it, the war will continue indefinitely long, and maybe that'll cause even more death and destruction in the long run than the one bomb will do, and it will also cause the war to stop. So decisions in war and in life that are sometimes called necessary evils are often given legitimacy or tolerated within a utilitarian way of thinking about ethics. Okay, but there are other ethical universalist theories too, and utilitarianism was one of them. I want to try my best with the few remaining minutes that we have to at least tell you some things about another one that's a major rival to that. This is a theory of ethics that was developed by this man. His name is Immanuel Kant. He was a German philosopher of the 1700s mostly. He lived from 1724 to 1804. And he is a pioneer of a whole different ethical system, which has come to sort of be known as Kantianism, named after him. But others also refer to it by a broader title, which is deontology. Now, what the deontological or Kantian view says is that it's not about doing the thing that creates the most overall happiness or pleasure. So forget that. They say instead of trying to engineer the most happiness, and that's what's right, they say, no, there's a moral law, and you just have to follow that moral law from a sense of duty, no matter what the consequences are. Even if it makes nobody happy, you have a duty to uphold the moral law and abide by it, regardless of whatever. So act from a sense of duty to uphold the moral law. Regardless of the consequences. Sometimes the consequences of upholding the moral law will be positive. Sometimes it won't make anybody feel good, but it doesn't matter. You gotta do your duty and uphold that moral law either way. So deontology, the word derives from a Greek etymology. The word deon means of law. So, or sorry, I didn't mean that. Nomos means of law. I was thinking of a whole different lecture. No, deon means duty. So deontology is the ethics of duty. So it says you just have a duty to uphold the moral law, no matter what are the consequences of that. There are different types of deontological theory. Kant is the perhaps most well-developed in philosophy. But another very popular kind of deontology that's much more widespread is divine command theory. That's like religious morality. According to that moral perspective, and you probably know a lot of people, and maybe even you follow this, it's the idea that the moral law is whatever God commands, and so your duty is to follow the commands of God, and that's your moral obligation, regardless of what that entails. But there are some issues with divine command theory. There are certain criticisms that could be made. I mean, the obvious one is that it only really applies to people who believe that God exists, theists. If you didn't believe in God, then you would not be able to say, oh, I'm going to follow the word of God if you don't think that being is real. But even though there's a minority of people that are atheists, but most people believe in God, even if you do believe in God, though, there's still issues like, well, how do we interpret Scripture or whatever the religious text is in a way that is unambiguous? Because obviously there's a lot of theological and philosophic debate about what's the correct message that's been put forward in some of these scriptures. I mean, even just looking at the Old Testament, right? It says in one place, thou shalt not kill. So you say, okay, that's a commandment God's giving me. I should not kill no matter what. But then in Leviticus, you can read passages where it says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. He that blasphemeth the name of the Lord shall be stoned and shall be killed, and all the congregation shall stone him. So, I mean, there's like divinely commanded acts of killing on the one hand, and then there's also the general prohibition against killing. So some people might have a hard time distinguishing what the actual commands are, since it could be argued that there's ambiguity and contradiction in some of the scriptures. Another even more philosophical issue with the divine command theory of ethics is, well, is it really true that God can just make anything moral just by means of him commanding it? If so, morality starts to seem a little arbitrary. But if there are certain things that even God cannot make moral, like, I don't know, killing your children or something, then that means that he's not the author of morality because it has its own independent content. A story from the Bible that I think illustrates this little dilemma, maybe some of you guys know a little bit about Old Testament scripture, but there's a story in the Old Testament Bible of Abraham and Isaac. So let me know in the chat if anybody has ever heard of this story, but I'll just start telling you about it while you're thinking. The Abraham and Isaac story of the Old Testament. Okay, so Abraham was the original recipient of God's covenant in the Old Testament Bible. So he was the person who God called on to deliver his gospels to the world, to spread the message. And he said to Abraham, if you do this and you remain loyal to me, then I will create a homeland for the Jewish people that are being oppressed in Egypt under the Pharaoh at the time. So Abraham was like the knight of faith, the most allegiant to God, the emissary of his message to humanity. And that means that he was the most devoted to him, and he wanted at all costs to just follow the word. So one day God thought he would test Abraham, and he says, okay, Abraham, I have something I need you to do, and I want you to kill your son Isaac. Okay, so Abraham has a son named Isaac, and he loves his son more than anybody. And as you can imagine, when you have children, you love them and certainly don't want to harm them or even kill them. But it's God telling him to do it. And so that produces a big dilemma in his mind. He's thinking, okay, well, I really don't want to kill Isaac. He's everything to me. You know, he's my blood, he's my son. But this is God who's talking to me. And if it's God, I mean, you got to do what God says. And I'm Abraham, and I always follow God. So he prepares himself to go up to the top of Mount Moriah to slay his son at the top of the mountain. So I was asking, has anyone ever heard of this story or know any of the facts or details of the way it goes from here? If you don't, just say no. But if anybody does, I'd just be curious. No takers? It's perhaps obscure to some, but I'm just mentioning it in passing. Well, do let me know. Type in your answer if you have it, but I'll continue then from here. So he takes Isaac up, Abraham does. And that's right, Jasmine. At the last moment, as you know, Abraham, so he didn't really tell Isaac, first of all, why they're going up the mountain. He wanted to kind of not have to tell him this. And as he walks up the mountain, he's puzzled and thinking, am I really going to have to do this? I can't believe God wants me to do this. But when he gets up there, at the very last moment, God brings down an angel and he substitutes for Isaac a ram. And then that becomes the offering given to God. He slays the ram instead of his son. But that doesn't really eliminate all of the moral questions that are problematic. For example, could God have made him follow through? Or was he inevitably bound to withdraw the commandment? If God could have made him do this and made it the right thing to do, then it starts to seem like morality has no meaning, because God can make torture, kill, anything, even against loved ones, moral. But if God was bound to withdraw the commandment because nobody, even God, could make that moral, then it seems like divine command theory doesn't really issue from the dictate of God, but from some other source or judgment. Okay, now Kantian deontology is a little bit of a different flavor than the religious version of it. It's kind of like a secular alternative, which still says there's moral rules that you have a duty to abide by. But it doesn't necessarily presume that they have to be issued by God. It just says reason that we all have as human beings can discover the moral law. And that leaves it open whether this comes down from God or from something else. Reason can be given by God or it could be developed by nature. But whatever it is, we're human beings and we do have it. That's the reason that we can have language, that we can have technology, history, and all the rest. So we have reason, mathematics, science, chemistry, we could go on, physics. But anyway, we have reason, and he thinks the same reason that can give us insight into all that stuff can also be used to reveal the moral law to you and what you're supposed to be doing according to the moral law. So Kant's version of deontology says that when you use your reason to discover the moral law, you'll be using this rational principle, which is kind of like the core of his whole ethical viewpoint. And this principle is called the categorical imperative. So this is Kant talking to you now. He says, do you want to know what the moral law is? Then reflect on the so-called categorical imperative. And here's what the categorical imperative says. It says, act always so that your action could be willed to be a universal law? Okay. Try to make it a little darker there. But yeah, so act always so that your action could be willed to be a universal law. Kant says this, when you're about to do something, whatever it is, ask yourself this one question. What I'm doing right now, is this something that everybody could also do and it would still be possible and not undesirable? If everyone could do what you're doing, then it's fine and it's okay, and the moral law allows it. But if it's not possible for everybody to do what you are doing, then that's bad, it's wrong, and it violates the moral law, so you should not do it. Like, let me give you an example. Say that you want to take a free ride on the subway or whatever. So you're not going to pay the toll. You're going to hop over the turnstile and just get in for free. Now, that only works if you're doing it, but not everybody else. What is the case if everybody takes a free ride on the subway 100% of the time? If everybody did what that person is doing all the time, then there would no longer be any money coming in to fund the actual subway because there would be no paying customers. And that means that it would have to have its services eliminated. So does the free rider want everybody to take a free ride? No, they want the subway to have funding. So they actually hope that everybody pays for it except for them. That's wrong, and you can tell that it's wrong because when you think through it, you understand that this is not something that could be done as a universal law and still be coherent and organized. So it's not right. And that's the pattern that you keep seeing as you think about this categorical imperative. Other examples, suppose that you wanted to get a friend, or, well, you probably shouldn't do this to a friend, but say you wanted to get a person, shouldn't do it to anybody, so anyway, but yeah, suppose you wanted to get a person to loan you money, but you had this thought in mind. I'm going to have to promise them to repay, otherwise they'll never give it to me. But I'm not going to repay, so I'm just going to lie. I'll go up to him and be like, yo, can I get 20 bucks? I swear I'll pay you back next week. And in my mind, I'm like, haha, I'll never do that. I hope they give it to me. Okay, so say that was your deal. You're like, I'm going to make a false promise of repayment so someone will give me money. So someone will like give me money thinking it's a loan. Now, if everybody did that, whenever they requested a loan, then the loan would not be offered by the lender because lenders would know that 100% of people, when they ask or promise to repay, they're not going to. So even the false promiser doesn't want everyone to make a false promise. Otherwise, their current false promise would be known to be such, and it would not be effective at getting them the money they want. In fact, what they want is for most all other people to actually make correct promises that they keep so that their lie will be assumed as truth. So the lying promiser knows that if everybody does what they're doing, their own action wouldn't even work. So that's another indication that reason is telling you it's wrong. So anyways, if you want to live according to Kant's moral philosophy, then you just have to check before you do something whether it would be okay or possible even for everybody to do it. I talked to you before about the utilitarian who would say it's good to lie about the, I don't know, tuna casserole that someone made that was really gross, but you want them to feel better about their cooking. In Kantian world, lying, even if it's for a noble purpose, can't be justified because if everybody lied systematically, then no one would even believe the liar, and that would undermine the point of the lie itself. So it's only okay to do things that would be both possible and not undesirable for everybody to do. And that's what the categorical imperative says. So that's a whole different way of thinking about ethics. Okay, now there's just a little bit left that I wanted to mention that's at the tail end there of chapter 9. There's a little discussion of rights, and there's also a discussion of virtue. So let me just briefly mention those points. Some people say that when you think about ethics, one of the major concepts that you'll think of is the idea of rights, okay? But there are two types of rights that are often mentioned in any discussion of them. So let me put that here, two types of rights. Now, one of the two types is known as, or is called, liberty rights. And then the other are welfare rights. Okay, so liberty rights are rights to be not interfered with, the right to be left alone to do whatever you have a legitimate interest in doing. So these are rights to be left alone to pursue your legitimate interests. Welfare rights, on the other hand, these are rights to be provided certain essential goods if you're not able to provide them for yourself. Okay, so let's just quickly try to refer to some examples of the two types. Starting with liberty rights. So those are rights to be left alone to pursue your legitimate interests. These rights don't require that you be given anything. They just require non-interference as you do certain things that you have a legitimate interest in doing. So these require people to back off and leave you alone while you do certain things. It's like, these are like don't tread on me type of rights. But in this case, these are rights to be provided certain essential goods. We're not talking about a right to like the PS5 or like a new pair of Air Force Ones, whatever, but no, the right to be provided certain essential goods, like things that humans can't go without, whether that's, we'll talk about that in a moment because I want you to think through it, but certain essential goods if you cannot provide them for yourself. So if there's no way for you to get it either through your own circumstances or through some other external cause, then if we claim that these welfare rights exist, then there has to be a mechanism to provide you with such things. Okay, so let's go over this. What do you think would be the right to bear arms? Which kind of right would that be? You've got just two options. Think about it, and I'm sure you'll give me a good answer. What do you believe is the category that the so-called Second Amendment right to bear arms would fall within? What's that? Yes, it's a liberty right, correct, because the right to bear arms is not a right to be issued a gun if you can't afford one. It's a right not to have one taken away or not to have the ability to purchase one interfered with or no obstacles to your ability to possess one. So people are honoring your liberty rights in society. The society honors those liberty rights if they don't interfere with your pursuit of such a weapon if you want to have one for yourself. Okay, sometimes people talk about a right to food and water. And suppose that that's the case. If there's a right to have something to eat or drink, what would that be? Now we've switched from Second Amendment right to bear arms to right to have food, maybe water. What do you think? This one. That's a welfare right, yes, because the argument would be that, okay, if you are in such dire circumstances that you don't have the means or ability to provide for your own food and water, then there's got to be some mechanism in society to provide you with those necessary goods that you can't otherwise attain. If there's a right to freedom of religion, what would that be? Liberty or welfare right? You have a right to practice your religion under the First Amendment, at least in our Constitution. Well, what would that be? Freedom of religion. It's a right that people hold dear, and it would fall into the category of liberty right, yes, because that means people are not allowed, society's not allowed to interfere with the practice of your religion or to somehow prefer one religion over another and create like a sort of favored religion under the state. So yeah, that's another of the liberty rights. Freedom of speech would also be a liberty right because that means no one should be able to silence or shut down your speech, political or otherwise, in a free society. So on the other hand, I don't know, right to an education, that would be a welfare right. If you couldn't afford, like, I don't know, private school or something, we establish and institute a public school system so that people can get a necessary good, which is their primary education if they have no other means to do it. Right to health care. I mean, many people believe that you have a human right to have health care if you're not otherwise able to get it through a private insurer. Some people would argue that's why there should be like a national healthcare system that provides medicine and care to people if they are not otherwise able to pay for their own insurance. So I'm not saying whether, you know, what my views are on either of the two, but that's the nature of rights. Many people who affirm rights believe that they're not given by governments, but rather somehow given by God or even just by human nature. But those are the two kinds. Liberty rights are rights to non-interference, and these are rights to be provided certain basic essential goods that you're not otherwise able to get for yourself. I don't know if there's more from the book I'd like to mention on that, but it says here, liberty rights, the right to be left alone to pursue your legitimate interests. A man who hates women may have an interest in keeping women out of the workplace, but it doesn't give him a right to do it since it violates her right to equal opportunity. A liberty right, and therefore is not freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to choose our major and career. Those are all liberty rights. Freedom of the press, I think, also would be like you can't silence the press or shut them down if they report things the government doesn't like. Welfare rights entail rights to receive certain social goods, such as education, police and fire protection, healthcare, and so on. Okay, so now the last thing, with the just last minute of class, is that sometimes people also in discussions of ethics believe that the topic of virtue is like a main concept. And I know it's pretty brief to mention it in just a minute, but a virtue is simply a desirable character trait. Character trait does not mean like physical trait, like tall or whatever, but rather something that's good about your personality and character. Like, for example, examples of virtues. They're the kind of complementary traits that people say about you when they think you're a good person morally. So things like being generous, being honest, being brave. Like, so, you know, your parents that are proud of you, they say, I'm so happy my kid is such a good person because, you know, they're this generous, honest, brave, kind, and we could just keep going on and on. Polite, fair. So some people believe that if you want to be a good person, you should just try to embody these virtues and develop them in your character. It sometimes reminds me almost of like some aspects of Christian morality where they say, what would Jesus do? Because Jesus is within, you know, Christianity believed as the moral paradigm for people to try and imitate. So whether it's Jesus or just people in your community that you know, right, like that you admire because they show these virtues in their way of acting and treating people. The most often explanation I've gotten from the theoretical work is that you try to observe people who display these virtues and imitate their behavior until it becomes second nature for you. Like sometimes, yeah, trustworthy would be another good one for sure, Sebastian, or loyal or whatever. But sometimes these virtues, it's kind of hard to define what they are. So many people say you just got to like learn by imitation, sort of like how children imitate their parents and then it becomes the way they act. So if it's not like automatic for you to be honest in a situation, just try to force it and go through the motions, and after a while it becomes second nature and it's something that you do without thinking. So anyways, that's everything I had to tell you guys about this last chapter of the book. So we'll be back next week. Make sure to follow your announcements. I'm going to send you guys the study guide, and at the appointed times we'll all meet up and go over those things before the final. So I got to run, and I know it's 5:15. But thanks again, everybody, for a great semester so far. We're not quite done yet. A little work left to do. But have a good weekend, and let me know by email if there's anything that you do need. Okay, have a great one, and I'll see you then soon.